Hello, everyone. This is Russ Tanner from GlobalSkywatch.com. This is our weekly meeting tonight. We're having it on Tuesday, February 12th, 2013, rather than Monday nights. And we're going to just cover a couple things real quick, and then we're going to have our guest on for us. First thing I want to say is if you'd like to watch this presentation live, go to globalskywatch.com/live, L-I-V-E, all small letters, and you'll have an option in the left where you can watch this program live. We're going to try to do this from now on every week so that everybody can watch, see video, as well as listening to the audio. You won't need to be on the phone anymore, but you can still call in the call-in number if you want to ask questions at the end of the program. Also, I just want to mention to everybody one item for our agenda. Really not going to cover much tonight. We're going to get right down to it. But we do have end geoengineering signs still available. When we ordered them, we did order some extras. We have 5 extras left. And then when we're done, we'd like to arrange for people to get batches in their area so they can have, 20, 50 signs shipped to a particular area, and then you can distribute them in that area much more inexpensively because half the price of the signs turns out to be shipping. So if you'd like an end geoengineering sign, please go to the Global Skywatch website and click the project's link up in the header, and then click on the End Geoengineering Project. And then you can read all about the signs there, and you can also purchase signs directly from that page and have them shipped to you. And if you would like to be a distributor for them, then please, by all means, let me know, and we'll work out to get those signs shipped directly to your location. What I would like to do tonight is we have a special guest, Clifford Carnicom, who is the founder of the Carnicom Institute. If you are at globalskywatch.com/live, you'll be able to click a link to watch his screen live while he shows you video and papers and information that he would like to share with you tonight. Clifford, it's an honor to have you on here again. Good evening.
Russ, thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to be here again tonight. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much. And I want to just tell the people listening in, we should have a pretty good crowd listening in tonight, that if you want to listen in, once again, go to globalskywatch.com/live, and you can click the big icon at the top that says Listen Live, or you can click the link in the left, and you'll be able to hear audio and video of this program. It'll be delayed about anywhere between 10 and 30 seconds, but you can still listen in. If you do want to call in, you can call the call-in number that's also listed there if you want to call in and ask a question a little later on. But I want to get right to it tonight. I'm very happy to have Clifford. In my opinion, Clifford is really doing groundbreaking research that is really important, which is why we're having him on here, obviously. And I want to just, what I like to do is just give the floor right to our important guests and give them the opportunity to let us know what's going on, what they're researching. And what would you like to get started with, Clifford? Are there any things you'd like to say up front and share with everyone?
Thank you, Russ. I thought what I would do tonight is basically summarize some recent papers that I put up there in the month of January. My time tonight probably won't be as long as we had last time, so it'll be a pretty quick summary, actually, of these 5 papers. I'm sure it'll consume most of our time, and I always say something's quick, and it ends up always taking me longer, and then allow for some questions, realizing that what we're speaking of tonight is really just a snapshot of the work that is going on. But it's an interesting sort of set of papers that arose during the month of January that might be of interest to us.
Well, great. If you want to jump right in, what would you like to get into?
Yeah, that's fine. So what I'll do is give folks a couple of ways to get there if they'd like. I wouldn't worry about the links if you don't make it, but I will mention them. So if you want to follow along on these papers, at least just be exposed to them or introduced to them, then you can do so. Russ is apparently able to show what I have on the screen to some extent. I'm not sure of the delay, so that method might be available to you. And the other method, you could just go to the Institute site directly and access these papers as we're speaking also. And if you choose to do that, the link to go to is carnicominstitute.org. It's a nonprofit, carnicominstitute.org, O-R-G-O-N.com. And then you'll find a button right at the top that says Announcements. And in that page called Announcements, which I'll go to now, there's a list of about 10 things there, but I'm going to be picking about five items that are grouped together in the center of this list and go through these chronologically. And if and when it's okay with you, Russ, then I'll just start that process.
Yeah, why don't you go right ahead, and I will make sure that your screen is appearing perfectly in the simulcast. So far, we're so good.
Okay, thanks a whole lot. And also, before we start, I did want to mention a note of thanks besides you, Russ, and what you've done the last time. There's a Professor Tracy that wrote a summary of our meeting last time and made that available to the public, and I wanted to thank him for the excellent summary, I thought, that he made of our conversation, as well as distribution of that to a fairly large audience. So I want to thank him as well as you for that.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I actually had some contact with him. He did a great job. Wonderful.
Now, what I thought I would do tonight is present a summary of about 5 papers. And what happened here on my side is that January was a busy month. In a way, I wish that my life could be like this on a regular basis and I could devote my time to it at that level, but I just can't. And right now we could easily be looking at another month or two before I get a concentrated sort of session where I can do this kind of work, because most of my time actually goes towards making a living. But there was a little flurry, and this is the way it happens sometimes when I get a little round where I can get in there and do some work. Quite a bit happened in the month of January of this year, and basically had about 5 papers pop up within a week or two of time. And there are occasions where a single paper might take me anywhere from 2 to 3 months to work on, but we had a little flurry of activity here. And the reason primarily that this occurred is because of the acquisition of a piece of equipment that certainly I have had the need for more than a dozen years. And this type of equipment is really quite expensive. It's beyond our means. We'd need 20 grand to buy one of these instruments, and it is what we need to get a modern one. And I've been watching for years to try to get a hold of one. And the opportunity did arise to find a used instrument that had the prospect of working. This instrument was made in 1983. That's before really our computer technology is headed into full swing. So it's more in the analog world. But this instrument is called an infrared spectrophotometer. That's what it's called. Now, this type of instrument is extremely valuable. If you were to try to come up with a single instrument that's probably the staple of organic chemistry historically, an infrared spectrometer would be such a machine. There are additional machines and equipment now, and actually it's sort of a set of instruments and approaches that are used to take on these problems now. But if you were to pick one instrument that would provide you valuable information about organic substances and compounds, this instrument would be it. And we're very fortunate to have acquired this instrument. Truth is, it didn't work when I first turned it on, but I worked for a couple of days, and I got this thing working. And the importance of this is that we're dealing with, in my work over the past several years, we're dealing with an emphasis on impact of environmental contaminants and pollutants, I guess would be a mild way of saying it. The impact upon, eventually it's all life on the planet. But for right now, to satisfy our immediate needs and interests, there's a focus on the human being. And what I'm saying there is that the human being, our lives are being impacted and affected in a detrimental fashion. There's no doubt about it with respect to health. Now, organic chemistry is the study of basically the molecules of life. This is what it is. Now, I'm not an organic chemist by trade by any means. I've had to become involved in 24 disciplines easily in the work that I'm doing here with this. I have a background that, let's say gives me access to these type of disciplines, but we could certainly spend our whole life being an organic chemist. I'm doing the best I can with my time. But I've made some progress, and I have spent some time in this field over the last couple of years. Now, with this type of equipment, another reason that it's valuable and why it's used so often is that most organic compounds, if you were to sort of grab a sampling of organic compounds in solution, most of them are clear. They're transparent. And what that means is you can't see anything when you're looking at them. And this is where spectrometry has sort of come to shine, because it's a way of passing energy and light, various forms of light, through these substances and getting a reaction from them. And there's all kinds of different wavelengths of light. And in fact, I've spent quite a bit of time before this machine with what's called a visible light spectrometer. And what I learned, I didn't know exactly when I started what to expect, but the lesson of visible light spectrometry is whatever you're looking at has to be colored. You have to be able to see it. A great example of that would be, for instance, blood. Blood is a nice red color, and because it has color, you can run it through that type of equipment, which is much simpler, by the way, much simpler and much less expensive, but also can't tell you nearly as much. Visible light spectrometry is not very revealing in terms of the nature of things in general. So infrared is, though. Infrared is quite fascinating. Infrared is sort of equivalent to the far end of the after red. You know how you see blue and green, and then you get to red. Well, if you can imagine yourself going on and your eyes being a little bit more sensitive, you'd get into the infrared range. And we detect infrared as basically heat. If you put your hand in the path of this beam or a solution of any kind, you'll feel heat. It gets heated up. And when it gets heated up, things move. Everything in the world, certainly in the world of chemistry and biology, is composed of atoms and molecules, and these things are bouncing around. And in fact, they're bouncing around all the time. One of the interesting things I ran into over the last couple of months in this is, this business of zero-point energy and such. I've actually had sort of no foundation as to what we're really talking about there, but it's quite interesting. Even when things are at complete rest, what we regard as complete rest, like absolute zero temperature, everything actually is vibrating at all times. But if you pump infrared energy into it, light which you cannot see, it vibrates more. And not only does it vibrate more, it vibrates in very distinctive and unique ways. And it is so unique and so distinctive that this tool can be used to identify what they call the functional groups. But think of them as sort of the building blocks, the compositional elements of life, or organic molecules. And it is an incredibly important and powerful tool to be able to identify the basic building blocks of any living structure when you need to know about it. And we need to know about it. We need to know about certain forms of growth that are occurring. Most of you, or many of you, are familiar with the term Morgellons, and we probably spoke about this to some degree last time. It is certainly a focus of my effort over the past several years as sort of a consequence, I guess I would say, to the environmental focus which preceded it. for a good 10 years. I'm there and here studying these things because of the connections between them. And so if we could gain insight into the sort of molecular composition of something that is affecting our health and biology, that's valuable and that's important, and far more valuable and important than I think most people realize. There in the world of the public that has no access to this type of equipment in general, nor the means. This type of equipment we're talking about is normally, I'd say, very, very relatively expensive. $20,000 just to get started. You can easily get up to $250,000, $500,000 getting involved in this type of equipment. You have full laboratories that will address the type of problems we're speaking of. We simply don't have that. But at least we have an important sort of inroad into things here. But there are individuals that think when you have a problem like this, in particular Morgellons issue, that one approach is just to try things and see if they work. And try things can be anything under the sun. You can try your colloidal silver, and you can try any of your herbal supplements, and you can try anything you want. And you see if you have luck. Now, that's just not the way I work. It's not the way I can work. Because okay, here'd be another example. People would say, hey, my goodness, just hit a frequency on there, and it'll, I'm sure we'll figure it out. Well, these approaches to me are very, call it inefficient to say the least, as well as a stab in the dark. The whole popularity of Rife equipment, this type of thing. Listen, when you do this stuff right, it's not a guessing game. The electromagnetic spectrum is infinite. You couldn't break it down into enough frequencies. And so when somebody says, well, try a certain frequency, I'm actually not even too interested in talking about the subject, particularly until you give me a rationale for what frequency you're using and why. And basically you have infinite choices to choose from. So there's real problems from my side with the business of stabbing in the dark and hoping something works. Now, the way my mind works, and it's frustratingly slow sometimes to get to where we need to be, but if you start studying biology and biochemistry and disease, you'll find that the absolute beginning of understanding of what to do, what strategy to develop to, let's say, interfere or counteract the effects of something, you need to understand, you need to know its molecular structure. And you need to know it in absolute detail, ultimately. This is what we need ultimately. I don't know what it's going to take to get there. I know what it takes in terms of equipment and knowledge to get there. We're far from that. But this is what I wish to do. And it's why I have spent so much time trying to get to this answer the best that I can. You need to know the molecular structure. I brought up this point in the talk I gave in California last August. But roughly 50% of our body is made up of proteins. I've certainly come to realize the importance of proteins in my work. The classic phrase of proteins being the building blocks of life, right? Well, it's very true. Proteins are where the action is in terms of growth forms, in terms of structure, in terms of function. The other part is primarily fuels, right? Carbohydrates and fats, and more from a fuel standpoint or using something. But proteins are where things are made and where it has form. And I made this point in the talk in California last August. But as an example of sort of the importance of what we're speaking of, if you look into how the AIDS virus was actually impeded, and we can see that there was well over a decade of work that took place at the professional level with basically no end of resources and funding thrown into that type of research. What is found, and this is not atypical, what is found is that the method by which the AIDS virus has been impeded is by interfering with the protein structure associated with that virus. Now, you would not be able to do that, and basically you would not have success in terms of impeding or interfering with the AIDS virus, which has happened. You would not be able to do that unless you had the molecular structure and composition of that virus and associated proteins to begin with. So it's an absolute necessity from my standpoint. Here's another ludicrous situation. I've made mention to this, and you'll find an editorial comment on one of my papers, which I don't make too often, but occasionally I get roused enough to do it, I suppose. But take a look at the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control report that they issued a few months ago on this Morgellons issue. After taking 3 years of the public's time, after taking $600,000 of your money, after deploying the full resources of the United States government as well as the Armed Forces of Pathology, and the tie-up of resources, money, to produce a paper which I have to regard as worthless, essentially. Absolutely ludicrous in terms of what that paper actually produces from a scientific standpoint. Well, take a look at that paper, and you'll find a very fascinating statement in there. And also what you won't find is even more fascinating. You won't find any detailed, specific information. You might think that there is. The layperson might think that they're somehow being given information of value. But if you actually look at it, there's nothing of substance provided in that paper. None of the hardcore information that you would need to know. Here's an example that occurs in that paper that's related to what we're talking about tonight. And that is, you'll find the statement in this paper that, we analyze these materials, and 85% of it is protein. Okay? You'll find that statement in that paper. Now, the way my mind works, and what I think is perfectly logical, is that if somebody tells me that 85% of something is protein, I want to know what the protein is. I want to know what the structure is, right? It's the very point that I've been making to us tonight. You need to know. After that statement is made, you will find no further reference to anything. The statement will just dissolve in air, and there will be absolutely no supplemental information given to you to tell you the detailed knowledge or where to go, if you regard it as a summary paper, to find the absolutely most essential and critical information that we need to know about the nature of this particular growth form. So these are some of the sort of impossibilities that we're being faced with in terms of seeking of fundamental questions, even by those that purportedly are doing so and even providing supposed scientific papers that document their work. So we're on our own, is what it amounts to, and the nonprofit that I have founded will do the best it can. There's no question it needs your help. If you want to find out how serious that need is, then talk to us. But it is very serious help that's needed. Now, it took me a while to get there, I suppose, to set the stage for this part tonight, but I would regard that as a prerequisite to put what we're speaking about in context tonight. And if we go to the website under carnicominstitute.org, or you go to the screen if you can see it from Russ's side, there's 5 papers that sort of just came up very quickly in the flurry of activity that I spoke of during the month of January. And they're on the announcement page, and there's 5 of them. And one of them is not at all done, not even slightly. It's just started. Oh, I have a misspelling there. Misspelling error there also I'll have to fix. But I'm going to read the titles of these papers, and then I'm going to step through them with your willingness and try to give at least a summary of what they are and what they mean in terms of the very problem that I'm describing tonight, at least a part of it, of trying to get into the nature of the structure of this thing from a biochemical standpoint. So here's the titles The first one is called Environmental Filament, Keratin Encasement. I know my titles are not exciting, okay, but it's what it is. It's a statement of fact. This paper is about environmental filament, keratin encasement, and we'll talk about it for a second. The second one is called Environmental Filament Penetration. Now let's think about these as the titles as we're going briefly so we know where we're headed. The first one is saying, looks like we might know something about the nature of the housing or casing of a particular filament form that's been of interest for many years. The second one is saying that it looks like maybe we know something about how to get inside that filament. The third one says Environmental Filament Faults Report. That one has to do with the disclosure 12, 13 years later, something that I've been sort of keeping quiet because I couldn't basically prove it, even though I knew it, that I had been issued a false lab report back in 1999. And missed one. The very first one is called Morgellons Infrared Spectroscopy Culture Confirmation. That was the first one. Then you had the other three, and then you have the last one, which call it, Russ graciously said that what we're talking about tonight is the public, general public won't know about this for years. He's right, is what it amounts to. This last paper, in my head at least, this is going to be a very important paper, as I think many of them are. But this particular one, called the Working Hypothesis, is going to be especially important. Right now, it'll probably be 2 months. I don't even know the time before I'll actually will even be able to work on it. I still have more lab work to do on it, and it can easily take a couple years for that paper even to reach any kind of circulation. Because my papers are not exactly easy reading material, or even in the bathroom with comic books. I guess it doesn't fit very well. But those are the 5 papers. Now, what I'm going to do, and hopefully if we get lucky, you might be able to see a picture on the screen on Russ's side, or you can go directly to the site, hopefully, and bring it up. But I'll try to put my emphasis upon showing you a photograph or an image if I have it. And we'll go over these papers and what they were about. Now, I tend to work chronologically. Every single paper I've written is in my head. I probably can recall almost every word that I've written over 14 years. It's all in my head, and I tend to think chronologically in terms of how all these things have evolved. And that's how I'm going to approach this one, is as the work evolved. And it is of interest to me to see the dates and how things happen. And so this first paper is called Morgellons Infrared Spectroscopy Culture Confirmation. Now, I'll bring up that paper, and I'm going to skip the title and the writing right now. Let's see, what I should do is I'll leave the summary statement there, the single statement, and I'll read it, and then I'll try and show you a picture. Now, hopefully from our previous discussion, we have an idea of the value and the reason that a person would be so sort of attracted to the use of infrared spectroscopy. It's passing light. It's passing energy through a substance, right, usually transparent, and looking at how that particular structure or compound responds to that light, and that reaction, that response, is essentially highly unique for anything that exists. So it's you could think of it as sort of like a fingerprint system for organic compounds. Now, here's a statement. I'll just read it, and then we'll show a picture there. With the use of infrared spectroscopy, it can be stated with a high level of certainty that the cultures, cultures, the cultures that have been developed over the past several years from oral samples are essentially identical to the oral filament samples themselves. Now, sometimes when we have a statement, in some ways it can see, for some people they can think, oh, that's incredibly obvious. How could it be, how can that be important? And other people won't have the slightest idea what I'm talking about. And on my side, it's important. And it took me well over the 10 to 12 years before I could finally make this statement. I will tell you from all other analysis as well as, and it's not really based on intuition at all, it's based on years and years of study. I will tell you that I've known that this is the case for years. I've known it for a decade. But for me to be able to say it with the level of conviction and confirmation that I have is what's different. And the only reason that I'm able to do that is specifically because of the use of this equipment I'm speaking of, infrared. Because for the first time, since I started this analysis of these unusual filament structures that you will find have a history going all the way back to 1999, they exist in an environmental sense, meaning our general ambient environment, trees, soil, sky, the outside world, and they eventually will manifest in the body. Is what we will see. What I'm saying here is that we've known for some time that the body, let's say many bodies, we can't say every one, but call it many bodies, B-O-D-I-E-S, right? Many bodies are in the state of producing a filament structure from the gums of the mouth when exposed to red wine. Okay, and these filaments are unusual, and we could talk about those for hours and hours, right? But we produce them, and there's no logical explanation for them. There's no conventional explanation for them, even though some people might make you think that that's the case. It's not the case. And so these exist in the body. Well, I've been doing work for years now on cultures. Again, why did I do that? It's not particularly exciting to people. People want to take, like I say, a certain herb or something and hope it fixes them and everything's fine and claim to the world that they have a cure. It's just not the way I work. It's not good enough. It's not even close to being good enough. And any time at all that you're dealing with some kind of bacteria form or growth form and you want to study it, there's no question that there's value in a culture. Why would you want to play around with your body trying things out for kicks and trial and error if you could isolate that form and study it under controlled conditions? It's the very basis of culture work in biochemistry. It's obvious to me that needs to be done. So I started that 10 years ago, or at least 6. I suppose that'd be about 6 years ago, I guess, on that. And I've been growing these cultures, and I've been saying for years, these are growing from the filaments. But I could never state at the level of conviction that I am tonight with you, as well as with this paper. This one came out on January 1st, I guess. Yeah, January 1st, New Year's. That the cultures, meaning that which grows from samples taken from the mouth, and filaments taken directly from the mouth, are one and the same thing. One and the same. And the value of that is that you no longer are wondering whether that's the case. And number two, you now do your studies on the cultures. You now have shown that you have a basis for doing the work with the cultures as opposed to trying to get inside the human body. It's valuable from an investigative point of view to resolve the problem. And the picture that I have up there, if that shows up in another 20 or 30 seconds for you, will be an example of what this instrument delivers to us. That graph may not be especially entertaining to you, but this is a graph of the oral sample subjected to infrared light, and below it I'll show you one of the culture from it. And you're going to find they're one and the same. And again, it's essentially a fingerprint. There is, in the infrared world, there will be no two things that are exactly alike. That's for sure. The complexity of interaction at the molecular level is far too complicated And you can never have anything that's going to be two separate substances. It's very unique. Visible light, you can't exactly say that. You just cannot get the level of information that you have from infrared. So hopefully you can see that picture. Russ, out of curiosity, did that show up on your screen again?
Yeah, it's coming through perfectly.
Okay, great. So that top graph is coming from a oral sample, okay? And the bottom graph, which I'm now dropping down to, and you can't see them both side by side, but you can play with that on your own time there. The graph down below, this is not actually, how would I say it? This is a different sample, okay? But you're going to find that it looks identical, essentially identical to the one previous. And this one is from a oral sample, and the other one is from a culture, is what it amounts to. And I see that I have to, one has a culture, right. One's a culture and one's an oral sample. Look at them, and they'll be the same. Now, if we go on another 5 hours tonight, which I'm not supposed to, I'm supposed to be done in an hour tonight. I'm just classic on never finishing what I say. But tonight, if we had the time, we could have a fascinating discussion about where these graphs that I'm showing you are actually going in our future. This is the topic of the 2 months that it's going to take for me to even have a chance at writing the last paper of the series that I'm trying to get to tonight. I've made it through one so far. But these graphs have a whole nother, call it window of revelation before us in our future when we can get to it. And I'll save that discussion for when we get to it. It's not just a matter of the fact that they're unique. It's what you can also learn from these graphs. There is a story being told. It may not be the stories that we're used to hearing, but there is a story embedded in these graphs that is a path of discovery to the inner nature, the inner composition of what it is that we need to know about something very important that we need to know about. And these graphs are part of that window into that path of discovery. And at the end of our session tonight, if I make it, I'll elaborate on that a little bit. Now, that's the first paper. 2 things are the same. Again, maybe it's obvious to people, fine. It took me 10 years to get there, to say it at this level of conviction. You'll find it referenced in all the papers that, yep, reacts the same chemically, looks the same, everything looks the same. But infrared is a level of evidence that is very difficult to deny. And I guess that would be saying it mildly. Now the next one, if I go back chronologically, the next one, that was on New Year's Day, put up. The next one is called Environmental Filament Keratin Encasement. These papers that we're talking about were things that you will find me making references over a period of years. These are the papers where I would be saying statements like, it appears that such and such. It is likely that such and such. Okay? It was that case for the paper I just discussed. It's also the case for the second paper. If you go back close to literally the beginning in 1999, when I was looking at this environmental filament, of which you'll also hopefully see a picture on the screen before too long, what you're seeing on the screen goes back to 1999 and involves the Environmental Protection Agency and their abject failure to serve the public welfare in the identification or lack of identification of this material. This material is highly unique, very complex internally, and is the source of many of our problems, it appears. You'll find papers that very early in the game will make a reference to something called keratin. Now, the easiest way to understand and relate to keratin, K-E-R-A-T-I-N, is your hair. At least for some of us that have some left. I do in parts, but apparently up top it's rather vacant these days. Your hair is composed primarily of keratin. And keratin, interestingly enough, again, is an example of a protein. We talked about proteins making up 50% of your body. Keratin is a very distinctive protein. All proteins are distinctive. But you want to talk about something that is difficult to break down. Hair is a protein that does that. Your fingernails and your hair. You try and dissolve those in some kind of water or acid or whatever and see how far you're getting. Very, very tough, incredibly resilient, incredibly impervious, and hence the need to unclog your drains. You'll find very early papers referencing the fact that it appears that this particular filament structure has some kind of encasement around it. In other words, like a sheath, something that is protecting it, okay? Something that is enclosing it. And you'll see me make a reference to keratin. And I make a presumption fairly early in the game based on chemical analyses and such that I was doing that it looks like this casing may be keratin. Now, why is this important? The reason it's important is because keratin serves as a very effective roadblock to discovery. It is very hard to break down. And let's just imagine you had something inside your hair, okay? Let's just say that there was something interesting inside of your hair follicles. Try to get to it would be the problem. If it's surrounded by keratin, it's going to be very hard to get to. As a matter of fact, it could be disguised. It could be the basis for somebody making an argument that, hey, don't worry about anything, folks. This is just a hair, okay? You're delusional, and this is just a hair. What are you talking about, okay? And from a superficial level, if indeed it is composed of keratin, you could actually make that argument for a while and get away with it, like mainly a decade or more, until somebody actually is able to get into it. And again, I've known it for years in terms of the information I've had available to me. But this particular month of January was a time where certain things happened. And what happened here is that I more successfully penetrated this filament than I ever had before. Okay, I had done some work in chemistry. You need very strong caustic material like alkalis. Lye is the classic one I've used to have any progress with this field. And I've made some progress in the past. But now that we have access to infrared, we have to know what's inside this filament. I know what's inside of it to a degree, but we have to get in there from a more formal standpoint, because indeed the supposition appears exactly and entirely correct that there is an exterior casing to this filament, which is what you would call inert material. Basically won't react with anything. It's impervious. You can't get to it. It's like nothing's happening. But if you could get inside this filament, you will find a sort of a revelation about what's really happening inside that's important. And this, things they're sometimes chance, they're intuition, they're guided by study. All kinds of methods lead to things. In this case, it took the 10 to 12 years to get to it. I'm sorry it took so long, but it did. But the fact is, at least we made it. And what happened here was, for the first time, I was able to break inside into that filament chemically in a way that I've never done before. And I've shown you the raw material up top. Russ, you've been able to see the white filament material on the stick, right? Have you seen that?
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, okay. Well, what I'm doing is I'm dropping down now, and you should see a photograph of a test tube. And when you can see this photograph, hopefully, this photograph is of that same white filament material, that environmental filament material, the filament material that was sent to the EPA and refused identification. The filament which has no reaction that you can see to anything, pretty much inert to everything, and nobody seems to want to be able to get inside of that. And as a matter of fact, I've seen photographs and filaments of that that filament material under an electron microscope years ago. Okay? And people would say, oh, my goodness, electron microscope, I can see everything. The fact is you can't see a darn thing. I've seen those photographs, and they didn't surprise me at all when I saw them. And what you see is basically the exterior casing of something. You don't have the slightest idea what's going in there, and that's because of the way electron microscopes work. They bounce off of things. They send electrons out, and they bounce off of a structure. And they don't necessarily penetrate it. You'd have to get into a cross-section of that, and that hasn't been done. So those photographs years ago under an electron microscope basically told us nothing. This picture that I'm showing you tells us that something's happening, something in very much the way that I have described over the years. Now, just take it at a common sense level first, and then we don't know all the answers here. If you'll read the paper, the point of the paper is that we're inside, a little deeper than we've ever been. That's the point of the paper. We're not talking yet about what's inside of it. That's a whole job. We know some things, but I'm saying from a standpoint of another path of sort of penetration of this filament, this is what's new here. But just from common sense, ask yourself, what kind of filament could you find in the world that is perfectly white? I mean, it's perfectly white. There's no color to it at all. Okay. Pick your spider webs. I don't care, whatever you want. Pick anything at all that you can think of that would be white, like the example I showed you up above, and you try to produce color from it. Do it any way you want, and you try to produce color. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to have a very hard time finding any such thing in nature, and particularly at the level that I'm showing you here. This method specifically involved the use of two forms of alkali. The specific method here was a combination of not just sodium hydroxide, or lye, many of you would know the term lye, sodium hydroxide, a very caustic alkali material, but also potassium hydroxide, a combination. And again, call it intuition, call it luck, call it study, whatever you want. It was done. And took about 45 minutes. These are some of the most caustic substances that are known chemically, basically. And believe me, I spent 2 weeks, 3 weeks trying, again, everything under the sun. I even read books. I read books that said if you put keratin, which you use your hair as an example, you put your hair in sulfuric acid and it'll dissolve quite readily. I tried these things. Sorry, it didn't work. Now, maybe the acid I had wasn't strong enough, but it wasn't trivial what I was working with. And the fact that it didn't dissolve at all, it was frustrating. It's very hard to get in this stuff. And regular strong lye won't even get into it. This particular combination of these two alkalis, two caustic materials, along with a combination of heat for an extended period of time, this took about 45 minutes of a boiling water bath with two of the most caustic chemicals that we know of. And we can be fortunate that I watched it for that amount of time. It's also interesting how time can be a factor, and sometimes that's really just a factor of luck involved, whether or not you were willing to wait around long enough to see something. Another example I'll give to that, you know how that culture process was discovered? It was discovered by accident. It was discovered by having some of those filaments placed in a wine solution, setting them to the side and forgetting about them, and coming back 2 months later and then starting to see that something was happening. Never would have happened without the passage of time. That was another stroke of what you call luck and or fortune, I suppose. But from a common sense standpoint, you tell me what it is that you're going to come up with. It's going to come up with this rather deep red. I'm not even sure the photograph does justice to it. It's actually a rather deep red color that came out of this. At the level of intensity of color that came out of this material. You can only see it. And so the point is, it's coming from inside, folks. It's inside. And this is what you need to know. We're talking about something that is sub-micron in diameter. A human hair is 60 to 100 microns thick. Asbestos fibers are 2 microns thick. Most filaments and and textile fibers are on the order of maybe 10, 15 microns thick. The filament that we're speaking of here is sub-micron. There's really nothing in nature that I know of that's even, get me something smaller than asbestos fibers. There's something inside is the point. And what's inside is important, and the colors are clues. They're beginning clues about what might be involved here. And I've written quite a bit on that, and we'll talk about it more if we had another couple weeks. But the point of this paper was that the filament structure has been penetrated broken into in a way that it's never happened before, certainly on my side. And consequently, the excuse for not wanting to know and to identify and discover what is inside can no longer be passed off. You must now know what is inside that filament. The third paper, and Russ, as usual, I'm way over my time plans. I'm through number 2 out of 5, I suppose. How are we doing in terms of your needs and schedule tonight?
We're fine. We can go as long as you need to. There's really no limit on my side. This is all being recorded, so people will be able to see it for years to come. So just take your time and present everything you want to present.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will set my own guidelines of trying to get through this without wearing out your patience, and then allow for some questions and answers. But that was number 2, and that one was dated January 6th. So 5 days later comes another thing that's been in the back burner for over a dozen years. If there's something that I can sort of appreciate in terms of how things work in the world of discovery, it is fascinating sometimes how you sort of have a little opening, I would suppose. A little opening. And I wish I had more time available to make more of them available, but this was a rather magical week is what I'm trying to say. The third one is called environmental filament. And by the way, you notice I keep saying the word environmental filament. So anyone, there are people that say, Carnicom, well, you're just working on this Morgellons issue. It's, it's all you ever do. Yeah, that's fine. You can say that. But you keep seeing the word environmental in these papers I'm talking about. And that's because of the connection that exists between what is now commonly called geoengineering, which I favor the term. I'm glad to see it. I do not use the word chemtrails. I don't think it's problematic in its own nature. But there is a tie, and if you're interested in that subject, the talk in California that I gave in August of last year, which is now on the website, courtesy of John White. By the way, John White has made that presentation I gave available to you on a public level now, and you'll find that presentation on our website and hopefully on his as well, but in our website on the media page you'll find that presentation. And that presentation in California was the first occasion where I basically made the case. The standards of my work are that I believe, we're basically in a courtroom of history and a courtroom of trial and crime and failure of disclosure. We're in that courtroom all the time. And my job from the very beginning has been to present the information in a way that, should I ever have been given the opportunity to present my case in the courtroom, this is the evidence that I would have presented to you. But the point is that talk in August of last year in California at John White's conference was that I do make the argument, and I would make that argument, and I will make that argument for anyone that is willing to listen and to hear it out, be it in the public courtroom or not, is that there is an irrefutable, deep and intertwined link between what we're now referring to as geoengineering and bioengineering. They they share fundamental truths of existence in terms of the nature of the materials, expected impact upon the planet as well as life. They are connected issues, and you cannot honestly confine yourself to either one of them in a solitary fashion. You must consider the linkage that exists from an evidentiary standpoint. Okay, this next paper is called Environmental Filament Faults Report. Now, this one is more of what you would call the human interest story, and I don't put too many of those up, not because, well, how would I say that? I'm not after raising sensationalism about things. I'm not after sort of the business of titillation and sensationalism with these issues. This is serious business that we're talking about, and the job has to be done. But there are occasions where a certain testimony is of more than casual interest. It's happened maybe 3 or 4 times over the dozen years where I will present it because it needs to be said, because it's important. Testimony is also is admissible in some cases as another form of evidence if it's sufficient, and those are the kinds of cases that I confine myself to. This is sort of a human interest case, I would say, that's been behind the scenes for also a dozen years. And again, I've known of it, but I couldn't write about it until I had a certain level of information available to me. And guess what it is that helped me have that confidence and conviction to be allowed, basically, to present this paper 12, 13 years after it existed. And I won't belabor the point, but infrared spectroscopy is a valuable tool. Let's say it that way. So what this paper is about, and I won't go into all the details, some of you might know some of it, but basically back in 1999, it was in the fall of 1999, within the first year, when the first environmental airborne filament samples were being collected and presented as saying, hey, there's something unusual going on. A laboratory, I have a colleague and a friend, his name's Dave Peterson. I've known him for years. He was one of the early folks that worked with me. If I gave a talk somewhere, Dave Peterson was the person that made that happen. He spent many years helping out, and he's still out there helping us. A laboratory was paid money to do what the EPA failed to do. As a matter of fact, if you read the EPA letter and the response, they basically say, hey, we don't have any obligation to do this. Go hire somebody. You'll find them saying that. Well, a laboratory was hired. And I don't think it's ever been said, but Dave Peterson put out his own cash to do this, okay? Laboratory was paid. They were given the job of doing what the EPA was supposed to do. And that is, and the task is really quite straightforward. And that is identify this material. And you pay somebody money to do it, and you expect a certain confidence level in the results. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of it, and maybe you'll read the paper to get the details, because I have to move on. But the fact is, folks, is that a false report was issued. And it's not, of course it's of interest. That's a human interest part of it. Of course it is of interest, whether or not it was deliberate or intentional. But I don't know that. I don't know. But I do know that it's false. And now I can say it's false publicly. And I know why it's false. Okay? And you'll find this laboratory basically saying nothing to worry about. This is just it's just wool or silk or something like a spider's web. I know about this alternative hypothesis that has been presented over the years. I know about it very well. But I will tell you it's false, and we can go over the details of why that's false. There's no way in the world this is what is claimed in this report. And you can read the paper for the first time, that chronology of the meeting. And I'll describe the general meeting so that you know that there's an undercurrent to this that is fairly, potentially rather significant in terms of lack of disclosure and what has been kept from the public for this extended time period. I will go over that part of the report. But read it, and for the first time, you will have that chronology available to you about what happened in this particular meeting that took place in 1999 with a paid laboratory. But I'll give you the sort of core element of this meeting so you have a sense as to what happened here. You know that a laboratory was hired. I was doing my own work. When I wrote to the EPA and we gave them this material, I was doing my own work. I was doing work in the ways that I have available. Chemical analyses, the best I can. It's homespun, right? I use what I could, and you'll find all that work on the site. I get it under the microscope. I keep improving the microscope. Anything and everything that I can do with limited means, I do. And I must have had a dozen different ways I looked at that material. And the EPA refuses to identify it. That's a problem. I'm hearing, if you go back in the early days of reporting on this, you will find certain tenants would receive promotion and distribution on a widespread basis. Explanations would be given without any real substantiation, but suddenly you'll find them sort of dominating the public milieu of discussion on these topics. And global warming was what dominated the aerosol operations, that everything was fine, we're actually helping you out, folks, we just don't want to particularly tell you about it, or why. And the other one was, another one out of several, was this business about these filaments. Hey, don't worry about it, folks, they're just spider webs. We happen to have, inch-thick ribbons of spider webs 30 feet long landing on the highway, but don't worry about it because that's all it is. That's what was going on. And I was doing my work in my dozen ways that I had done. I knew that this was not any kind of spider web by any stretch of the imagination, and that it was a lie. I knew that. I knew that back in 1999. But the setup now for this paper is to realize that a laboratory is paid. The EPA has refused it, right? A laboratory has been paid to do the work, and I'm doing the work on my own, reaching my own conclusions that certainly something's not jiving here, something's not fitting. They issue a report. When I read the report, I knew it was false. It was simply false. Now, there's times when you have to be willing to stand up. It's not always easy because when you pay a lab, people tend to think people are gods, and how could they possibly do anything that was not right, especially from a certified laboratory. But the fact is I knew that paper was false. I didn't know if it was intentional or not, but I did know it was false. So Dave Peters and I took the forward motion of scheduling a meeting directly with the president of that company. We arranged a meeting to discuss, call it the contradiction of conclusions that I was reaching as an independent investigator, contrasted with a, quote, official lab report, contrasted with a failure of the EPA. And we had that meeting. We flew to that location, and we met with this individual, the owner and president of this company. And the atmosphere was a little bit tense, let's say, because I'm sure it was a little bit of a surprise to him that we were sort of arranging the meeting to begin with. And I had my list of 9 items, is what it was. I had a list of 9 things. And my purpose in going to the meeting was not aggressive or hostile in that sense. I had a job to do. And the job was to say, an independent analysis is reaching this set of conclusions. The set that you're offering appears to be false, and these are the reasons why your conclusions are false. And I started going through the list. And there's 9 of them. And listen, some of it's just basic, folks. You just look at something. You'd be surprised at how many people put something in a machine and push a button and expect the the revelation of life to come to them all in one quick little picture. It isn't that way, okay? It isn't that way. So the first thing you do is you look at something. And I'd spend many, many hours looking at this material. And I could tell you from any one of the 9 alone that I had that this certainly wasn't spider's web or in what it was claimed to be. I had 9 items on the list. I stated the first one. There was no response from this individual. He basically was silent. And this is where a little bit of tension, let's say, was developing in the room. He wasn't saying anything. He heard the first one, and it was that simple as saying, I've looked at it. This is what I see. These are the photographs. Doesn't fit. And then I went to the second one. I stated the second one, and the words uttered out of the president of this company at this time after I finished the second statement his statement was, this meeting is adjourned. Okay. I never made it to number 9. I made it to number 2. And you can read the story, but it's appropriate now, and I will say so, it's appropriate that this information now be made available to the public because I did not have the level of confirmation that I have now with particularly this technology that we are speaking of and infrared that we've talked about. And another example of the importance of resources. You want to help folks? Listen, get some resources, whether you're going to join this organization or not. Get some resources and muscle behind this in a serious way so that you're not waiting around for 13 years to learn something that I've known for 13 years, but because I can't prove it, because the equipment, technology, resources, or funding doesn't exist sufficiently to do so, you get to wait around for 13 years to hear it. It's totally unacceptable. So I'm asking you to get involved, get serious, because you cannot wait around another 13 years to get to the level that I am trying to give to you. Sorry for the tirade, but I can get going. There is absolutely no excuse for this. Do you know what it is like for me to know this information for a dozen years, for over a decade, and not be able to write to it about it simply because I cannot provide the evidence at the level that would hold up in court should it ever appear? Do you know how frustrating that is? So I'm asking you in a cordial way and in an energetic way, let's move on beyond this point, folks. You start enlisting all of your resources, whatever they are, so that we don't do this, because it's not going to work at this pace. I don't know. I do not know the time schedule for the future. As Kate said, I don't know if Kate's here tonight or not. I think she is, but as Kate has said to me recently, the information is there, folks. You have enough information. I could do this my whole life, but you have enough. You've had enough for years. So move it forward at the level that it deserves. And apologize for any tirade there. Okay, I think we made it through 3. No, we're doing better than that. Hey, great. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wow, we made it through 4. And the last one I haven't written up anyway. I'm aware of the spelling error there. I see folks, and I'll fix it later on. But the last one I haven't really written up because this may be the next 2-year project that we can't afford to wait for. But I will at least give you the summary. And what I'm doing tonight, and this is where I appreciate Russ sort of giving us a little lead of what he was saying about not knowing for years, that he's right. This last paper, there's a lot going on in my head here that you folks just don't know about yet. You know some of it, but you don't know what's going on here yet. And all I did was I gave you enough. No, I didn't even give you enough. I gave you a clue, okay? I gave you a clue with the time I had right now as to where we're headed. And I'll give you the general summary, and then I just have to let you know that at the rate we're going, we may have several years ahead of us again. And the fact is, if we had the right means, tools, resources, staffing, funding, professionals in the field of biochemistry and medicine, you should have this answer within a few months about what I'm talking about, if not less. But as it is right now, you're set up to wait for another half a dozen years before it's understood what's happening here. But the title of this paper is the following. It says, I'm going to read this one because I just have to give you the information, and then I guess I can only set the stage that if such things were to pass, and we were to have the resources, the time, and the funding, and the staffing, and the professional expertise to get what we need to get to, this would be the stepping stone of where I think at least one path that we need to be following very, very seriously. I'll read this one, and then I'll probably end for tonight, and then I'll try to answer a few questions if you'd like to. But bear with me on reading this one. I'll try to take a little slow, and it's only the opening paragraph. The title of the paper is called, or will be called, Morgellons, a Working Hypothesis. Thyroid, liver, oxygen, protein, and iron disruption. Now, if you look in my papers prior to this point, you will see quite a bit of discussion on, well, you'll definitely see quite a bit of a discussion on iron. You'll find a 35-page paper that took well over 3 months to write on iron disruption. You will find numerous references to proteins and amino acids. You will find hints. You will find hints of the oxygen issue. There's a study that I've done that we simply don't even know about yet. That's important, related to oxygen, but it's an individual study. It's not formalized. And then you won't really find anything about the liver. What's new here that has not been talked about yet, the first one will be the liver, and a granddaddy here that's coming up is going to be the thyroid. This is new in my presentation over the decade and what this means. It's not necessarily new to other people. I will tell you, there's an individual that's been telling me for a couple of years now, a few years, saying, Clifford, there's something really important here going on with thyroid. You better look into it. I'm aware of it, but I didn't have the means. I did not have the means, meaning the equipment, resources, okay? Technology is important sometimes. You don't go looking at molecules with your eyeballs. And I knew there was an interest, but something has happened here. Something has happened in a tantalizing fashion with the use of infrared spectroscopy to indicate that something rather important with respect to the thyroid may be happening, and likely is happening. Again, you know how I do my work. I have to be able to make the case in court before I can present it to you, and that's where we need to go. And I know what to do. I know what we need. I don't have the time. I'm making a living, basically. I don't have the time to do it, and I don't have the equipment to do it in detail, but I will be doing what I can. But that's what's new in this paper, that it's my clue to you to now consider that entire set that I'm giving to you, the entire set, meaning thyroid, liver, oxygen, protein, and iron, that set has evolved from years of work as a sort of consolidation of the work in a summary way, that gives you an idea of the scope and magnitude of what it is we are dealing with in terms of impact to the human body. And there's an analogy here in terms of the sentiment of this particular phrase with that of the seven. If you listen to the documentary or watch the documentary I made, or some of the interviews, you may have heard me run through this list of 7 applications of the aerosol activity, right? And I won't go through that all tonight. But that list of 7 took a dozen years to come up with. This is another one of those sets that is evolving. And no single one of them, again, just as in the other, is enough to focus in on. We have to look at the set. But if you accept this set, the set of words, as being of sufficient interest to you, there is absolutely no way in the world that you can look at this set of these 5 words, thyroid, liver, oxygen, protein, and iron, and not begin to realize the amazing sort of impact that a combination of these influences would have on human health. I've mentioned earlier tonight that roughly 50% of our body alone is made of protein. Listen, one word out of the 5, I'm talking about half of the structure of our body. And then you get into these other things with iron and what that means in terms of oxygen. Here's another one for you. Listen, look how much we're covering with these. Protein, 50% of the body, right? Okay, when you study biochemistry, you will find that all life, the energy of life, is dependent upon respiration, the act of respiration. Respiration is not just breathing. Respiration is the process of using oxygen to generate energy. Okay. Respiration is just like they say, the sun is the source of all life that exists. Not entirely correct, by the way. There's chemical sources of life they've discovered at the bottom of the ocean. But the point is, it's big. It's big, and it's really important. And oxygen and iron and protein are already there. Okay. Now, the liver is this is newer again, new kid on the block here in my work. But your liver has to do with your toxins, right? The accumulation of poison in our body. And the last one, which is a real big granddaddy, that's now I have a basis for introducing this word to you, and I'll give that basis briefly to you, and then we'll quit. The thyroid is the regulator of our metabolism. Now, there's a certain time in my evolution of my work where a word finally connects, that I finally understand what it really means. And sometimes it just takes me way too long, but it's just the way it is. And other people are already there. 40 years ago, there's people there that understand what the thyroid is about. I'm at a point, because I have a connection. I have a connection with the work. Explicitly in the laboratory with something I can see. Those graphs that I'm showing you are important. I have a connection now with the investigation of the thyroid. And the thyroid is the regulator. It's the grand regulator of our metabolism. And one of our clues, which has been there for years, I'm also aware of this. I know it's there, but I have to make my connection. One of your clues is your temperature, your body temperature. There's hardly a soul that exists that we know right now that their body temperature is not lower than it should be. You want one of the most interesting sidelights going on in medical history right now. It's hard to find a source where you didn't grow up. I'm 60 years old now. It was drilled into us to where everybody just knows it by rote memorization, right? What's the normal human body temperature? And everybody says 98.6, and they just do it out of reflex. It's 98.6. Of course it's 98.6. Everybody's 98.6. It's 98.6. You go do your study. Start with yourself. Start with all your friends. Start with everybody you know. You go take your body temperature on a regular basis, and you go see what you find. And I will state without hesitation that you are going to find, in a general sense, if you do a fair and honest study, that the body temperature of the human population is lower than it's supposed to be, significantly lower. Numbers at 95 and 96 degrees are not uncommon at all, not in the slightest. And we won't have time to get into it tonight, but that difference is highly significant, highly significant. In your world, you might think, a degree here, a degree there, what's the difference? It is highly significant to have that kind of difference occurring in the human body. And the thyroid is your regulator. And this is one of your clues that the metabolism is screwed up. It's screwed up in a major way, on a broad scale. And go to the doctor's office and have them take your temperature and ask for a single one of them. They all see it. They all know it. Ask for a single one. They will take your body temperature and say, wow, did you know your temperature is 96.2? What's up with that? You won't find a single person saying a single thing, but I will tell you it's out there, and it's deep. It's deep, and it's broad, and it's very serious. And in my biochemistry study, certain phrases will just stick out with me as I go along. And they're like gems or things that come along. And they make an impact when the timing is right. And one of the guys in one of my lectures I was listening to, he says something like, every biochemical reaction, every single one, he wasn't making exceptions. He just said it straightforward. He said every biochemical reaction takes place at a specific temperature and a specific pH. And when he said that, I realized what he was trying to say. And that is, this is not just a random guessing game of hoping things happen. Nature is extremely complex and sophisticated and call it, how would we say, organized in its development of biological systems where things have to be in order for things to work right. And when either of those two things are disturbed, temperature or pH, the whole biochemistry is affected. And it's not a passing point of interest and topic of conversation to say that the body temperature of the general population, by all evidence, is significantly lower than it should be. And I'll read the paragraph, and then I got to quit. The paragraph is this. A body of evidence accumulated over a period of several years reveals that the Morgellons condition is likely characterized by a host of serious physiological and metabolic imbalances. These imbalances are caused by the disruption of a variety of major body processes, including, as a minimum, the regulation of metabolism by the thyroid, potential liver enlargement, a decrease of oxygen in the circulatory system, the utilization of amino acids important to the body, and the oxidation of iron. The impact of this degradation to human health can be concluded to be serious, debilitating, and potentially lethal in the cumulative sense. The reports of those who suffer from the condition are in alignment with these conclusions. This paper will summarize the body of work and chronology which leads to this more comprehensive hypothesis. With that, call it a little teaser in terms of where we could be sort of hung for years for me to get the information out to you and to have it substantiated, replicated, or refuted over the next half a dozen years. So if you want to move things forward, you got to get serious, whether it's with me or somebody else you want to work with. I'm not saying that you need to agree that what I'm saying is true, but I'm saying this is what I offer to you. And I will say, whether you agree or not, that I think you are being given a very, very serious lead of extensive and comprehensive investigation that is required to be done about this particular Morgellons issue, which has its roots and ties with what we popularly are calling geoengineering as well. So with that, Russ, I want to thank you very much for allowing me the undisturbed and uninterrupted time to present my information to you and the public that has shared our time and interest tonight. and I will try to answer at least a few questions, probably not real long, but I will try to answer a few questions, and I do hope that our time has been helpful. I value your time and your concentration here tonight. I know this is not simple material and entertaining material to be discussing, and so I value your dedication here tonight also.
Thank you so much for that, Clifford. If anyone would like to ask a question, please press *6 on your phone and you will be entered into the question and answer queue. Let me enable that mode right now so we can take. Okay, press *6 on your phone if you have a question for Clifford. You heard some information that, in my opinion, is really, really important, and it certainly seems like this affects, very possibly affects everyone to some degree or another, and some it can affect very, very profoundly, as in the paragraph that Clifford read, that cumulatively this can even be considered lethal. So this is very important information. We do have a couple questions, and so let's just get right into our questions. When you hear your phone unmute, then go ahead with your question. So here we go. Thanks, caller. Please go ahead with your question.
Hi. My question is regarding the heavy metals. How are they related to your recent research? Is there a huge direct involvement, or do you have any insight onto heavy metals?
Forgive me. I think, let me get Clifford back here. I think when we went into that mode, we may have, okay. Go ahead, Clifford. We have your audio back. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, Russ, thank you. The first thing I should mention, this is a standard disqualifier I put out there, all right? And hopefully everybody is familiar with this by now, because I try to put it in most every paper I write or anything I say. I'm not a medical doctor, right? It's to be understood. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not giving any medical advice to anybody. I'm an independent investigator and researcher, and I provide my information. I actually do highly encourage you to seek medical consultation in a way that you find beneficial and helpful to you, and that's not my purpose. But my purpose is to provide information from a research standpoint. In terms of this particular question, I guess the origin, I would first go back to the early work that if you look at some of the earliest papers that were focused on the environmental side, you will find that I am making conclusions. I do act independently at some point. I can't wait for somebody else to do something. The work on an independent basis, early in the game, you will see, is drawing attention to metallic salts. And that was like the early foray into the work, to say, these are metals, it looks like, in part, with what we're dealing with here. And you'll find, the body of work that introduces that subject and even the type of metals. And then you'll find the emphasis upon barium and this type of thing. And what does that mean, right? Barium is a highly toxic metal. You'll find papers of discussion of... Okay, let me back up. Much of life's chemistry involves salts. Now, take a really simple thing like table salt, sodium chloride. These are metals. Sodium is a metal, okay? Barium is a metal. Calcium is a metal. Magnesium is a metal. Metallic salts in their basic form are not an unusual, call it, entity in life. It's a very strong part of chemistry as well as biochemistry. But our bodies use these salts. And what happens, whether something is ionic or not ionic, meaning dissolves or doesn't dissolve, is really important. And our bodies depend upon these salts to function, particularly calcium, potassium, magnesium, are fundamental salts. I guess the way I would lead into this discussion would be that if you interfere with that process, you set up potential problems and complications, right? And when we say interfere, well, what do we mean by interfere? Well, there's different kinds of chemical reactions, but one of the common types of reactions would be substitution, where something comes in to join with something that normally shouldn't be there. And what if what comes in is toxic? Right? What if the ionic salts of the body have replacements taking place, substitutions taking place with things that aren't supposed to be there? Okay? So this is like one lead-in to me that says it's obvious that you should be looking for disturbances in the body, especially with respect to ionic salts, electrolytes, which is it's the motion by which things happen. It's how chemical reactions in the body take place, is primarily through these salts. If that process has any basis at all for thinking that it might be interfered or disturbed, then you better be looking at it. And then if it's a replacement of some kind or a substitution, might the body accumulate it? Okay, what is the liver doing? But would the body accumulate these toxins? And then do you need to get rid of them? And how would they show up? And how would you test for them? Okay, and hair analysis is actually, when I first heard of it, I thought it was sort of being something a little bit on the outside and fringe. Not true. Hair analysis is a fundamental measure of accumulation of metals in the body. And so it's a valuable tool, and in the research project that we're working on, this is one of the pieces of information that we're trying to collect. There's a whole section of work related to electromagnetic. That's a fascinating area, but this gets more involved, so we won't get into it too much, but be aware there's a whole set of papers involving the combination of electromagnetics with metals. Now you got me thinking about this. So there's gosh, we can talk now for a couple hours about metals, right? But the interaction of electromagnetics with salts in the body is a very important topic. And I'll give you a clue in the papers. If you search for the word potassium, you'll find a paper called Potassium Interference Expected. That's an interesting paper. And so that involves the consideration of metallic salts and their disruption with the electromagnetic energy that's been measured. A third topic of discussion would be this issue of iron. Iron is a metal. What is one of the most important metals that exist in the human body? Iron. What if that iron was disrupted or interfered with? And by the way, this is beyond the maybe. The papers say that it is interfered with in a substantial way, in a very serious way. And guess what it is that holds your oxygen so you can breathe and that your blood works. Many of you are familiar with hemoglobin. Go look into what's hemoglobin, what makes up hemoglobin. You'll find iron right at the heart of it. So anyway, these are maybe more generic examples than you wanted specifically, other than what I'm saying here is that, somebody is raising the subject of, well, hey, what about metals? And I'm saying, yeah, folks, what about metals, right? Do you realize how much you need to learn and how much you need to know and how much we need to know? And so that's my answer for now. Hope that helps.
Great. Caller, thank you so much for your question. And we have another question, so let's move to that person. You're online. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, Clifford. This is Kate.
Hi, Kate.
I just wanted to kind of make a plea that Clifford's work, as you can see, is really at the forefront of any research globally that is being done to unlock the codes of what is being done to us through the aerosol operation. And, Clifford has worked tirelessly for the past 12 or 13 years on his own with almost no funding, almost no no place to do his work. And I'm just saying that if you would like to either volunteer your talents, your energies, or your money, we need everything that you can possibly give right now, because, as you know, it's not just people with overt Morgellon syndrome or condition that are being affected, but we are all being affected because we all breathe. All life is being affected. So please, nobody else is supporting this work other than you. So I'm just urging everyone that's on this call and those of you that are going to hear this call played back to please go to CarnicomInstitute.org and look at what you can do for your country. Look at what you can do right now, because we need your help. So thank you.
Thanks, Kate. 2 words, point made. Okay. Point made.
Well, excellent. This is, I knew this before, but every time I listen to you, I know that we could do a series of programs for with the amount of information that you have to share. There's just so much that can be said, and I know our time is always limited. But I am so grateful for the work that you've done, and I've heard such positive feedback from people who have heard our previous presentation when you were on. We do have one more question, and then I think we'll wrap it up for the night. So go ahead with your question.
Well, I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to say thank you so much to Clifford for the service that you have done for humanity and for this planet and for all of us. I'm just awed by what I've heard tonight, and I just want to express my gratitude, on behalf of humanity. You're just an amazing, amazing, intelligent, brilliant man, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I truly view us as all in this this sort of plan together, and let's just say that I extend my value to you and basically every human being that makes this place a better place for us all in equal fashion, and I do mean that. We're all part of this. I do what I can. I'm good at some things and not as good at others. We all have that role, and my appreciation is extended to all those that basically stand up and are counted. So thank you.
Thank you, Clifford, so much for that. And I want to thank you, and I know everybody who's listening, we had very good turnout tonight. Thanks you for your work and your time. You have been at this for a long time, and as the caller said, you are on the forefront of this. To my knowledge, there's no one else who is covering this material, and there is not a whole lot of material that could be as important as this because of its scope and how it affects so many and so profoundly. So I know we've been on for a while here tonight. Perhaps we can even go on in the future and even get into more of the material that you've covered, because there's just so much. But I do urge people to visit CarnicomInstitute.org. Do I have that right, Clifford?
Yes, that's right, Ross. CarnicomInstitute.org, nonprofit. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And are there any final words you'd like to say to the people listening? This will be recorded. Many people will hear this over a period of time. Any final words you'd like to say to people tonight?
Yeah, none other than that which has been expressed. And you've given me a good opportunity tonight to sort of make the case. It's sort of interesting. It's like this is a month in the life of Carnicom Institute is what's happening here. I mean, this stuff happened during January. It's some of the latest work, and so I know that makes it more of interest to us in some ways that we know it's current. But I have to say that we have a body of work that precedes this that we could essentially take every month of the year for the last dozen years, and we could have, I think, an equally involved discussion at an equally serious level about these issues, and they simply lead up to this particular month. But to have a true understanding of the impact of this, at some point, that entire body of work needs to at least be, we need to at least be aware of it so that we can extract the information that we need to basically make this world a better place. And I'm only one player here. I mean, there's other people doing other things. We're actually far more limited than we should be, folks. I mean, this work should be occurring at 100 times the pace, 1,000 times the pace that it is. And I appreciate, the value that is attached to it. I do. But by the same token, listen, if I could, I would have offered you 100 times more easily by now. And really, we should be there. And I just want to impart that sense of immediacy and urgency that you don't get the luxury of waiting around 50 years for something when you could have learned it within a week of time with the right means and methods available. So I express the obligation that I extend to each one of us to take our part. And that contribution can come in so many different ways. I just happen to do this style of work because my background provides it to us. I could easily tell other people things they could do. And communication is a huge one. And this is why I appreciate what Russ is doing. Is his forum here and format of the show is very relaxed, and I really appreciate the ability to concentrate, because it's certainly the way that I like to work and think, and it's a rare kind of thing to find. I mean, if you notice, we haven't exactly had commercial interruptions in our flow here tonight. So that's a valued forum that you've established here, and I'm hoping people will take the energy and talents that they have. And as I was saying sort of in the last meeting we had, that you have to have a multiplication taking place. And it needs to be on the geometric and exponential side in terms of dispersion and distribution here. It's not the thing of telling one person. It's the 1, 10, 100,000 thing going on. And listen, it's time. It's far past time, and I thank you for being here tonight. But the real job is to take what you have and do something with it. So that's what I'm asking and hoping for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I 100% agree. And the reason that we didn't hear commercials tonight is because this isn't a commercial program. This is completely donated. My time and the time of others and the expense and the server and the bandwidth are all paid for privately. There are no sponsors. We're all doing this because we want this world to be a better place, and we want to help people, and we want to, I know in my own purpose and part is to alleviate suffering. And I feel the least that I could do is help to provide a platform to get this information that Clifford has so painstakingly assembled and labored to put together, to help get that out into the public view. And so that's my small contribution to try to get this important work and information out there. So I do, as well as I know everybody listening, thank you so much for your work and your painstaking effort in trying to do big things with a minimal amount of tools and resources. And I do encourage anyone listening to go to carnicominstitute.org and find out how you can help contribute to this, because the more people that are involved and the more resources that are available will enable more information to come forth through the hard work of people like Clifford Carnicom. And I want to say to everyone listening, thank you for joining us tonight. This was our first live simulcast. If you weren't able to get on the simulcast for some reason, or if there was a technical glitch, don't worry. We will have the video and the audio assembled and made available within the next day or two on the globalskywatch.com website. Just go to globalskywatch.com /live, LIVE, and you'll be able to see a whole history of programs that we have done in the past, and also what's upcoming in the future. So I hope everyone enjoys your evening. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, Clifford, for your great work and your contribution, and hopefully we'll be able to speak again soon in the future sometime.
I look forward to it, Russ, and thank you very much in return for all that you're doing, and also equal thanks to your listeners in the audience here, because actually they're the folks that make it happen is what it amounts to.
Excellent. Excellent.